40 million Americans need food stamps to eat in the richest country on earth. Politicians won't raise wages, won't control rent, won't solve the crisis, but they'll get paid during a shutdown while you starve. Make that make sense. 40 million Americans are on food stamps. Let me say that again so it really sinks in. 40 million people in the United States of America, the country that brags constantly about being the richest nation in the history of the world, cannot afford to feed themselves without government assistance. That's more than the population of Canada. That's more than the population of Texas and Florida combined. That's 1 out of every 8 Americans who needs help just to eat. And somehow, we're still calling ourselves the richest country on earth. Let me ask you something. If you're so rich, why are your people starving? If you're so wealthy, why can't your citizens afford groceries? If your economy is so strong, why do 40 million people need assistance just to survive? The answer is simple. Because America isn't actually interested in solving poverty. We're interested in managing it, containing it, and making sure it doesn't get so bad that people start rioting in the streets. We're interested in keeping people just barely alive enough to keep working their low-wage jobs, but not alive enough to have any power, any leverage, or any ability to demand better. Let's talk about why so many people are on food stamps, because the politicians love to pretend it's complicated. It's not. People are on food stamps because they don't make enough money to buy food. That's it. That's the whole story. Wages are too low and costs are too high. And the gap between what people earn and what things cost keeps getting wider every single year. The federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. It's been stuck there since 2009, 16 years without a raise. If you work full-time at minimum wage, you make about $15,000 a year before taxes. You cannot live on that. You cannot afford rent on that. You definitely cannot afford groceries, which have gone up dramatically while wages have stayed flat. So people work full-time jobs, sometimes 2 or 3 jobs, and they still need food stamps because their employers refuse to pay them enough to survive. And before anybody says, get a better job, let me stop you right there. Somebody has to do these jobs. Somebody has to ring up your groceries, serve your food, clean your offices, stock the shelves, take care of your kids, deliver your packages. These jobs have to be done, and if they have to be done, the people doing them deserve to be paid enough to live. That's not radical, that's basic human decency. But America doesn't do basic human decency when it comes to working people. America does exploitation and calls it capitalism. Let's talk about rent because that's the other half of why people can't afford food. The average rent in America is over $1,500 a month. In major cities, it's $2,000, $3,000, even $4,000 a month for a basic apartment. And there's no cap on it. Landlords can raise your rent as much as they want, whenever they want, for no reason at all. You could be a perfect tenant, pay on time every month, never cause any problems, and your landlord can still decide to raise your rent by $300 because they feel like it. Other countries have figured this out. Other developed nations have rent control, rent stabilization, policies that prevent landlords from gouging tenants, but not America. In America, housing is treated as an investment vehicle for wealthy people to get richer, not as a basic human need that everyone deserves access to. So rents keep going up, wages stay flat, and people can't afford both rent and food. They have to choose, and when they choose to keep a roof over their head, they end up on food stamps. This is a choice. This is a policy choice. America could regulate rent increases tomorrow if it wanted to. Congress could pass rent control legislation. States could implement rent stabilization programs. Cities could cap how much landlords can charge. We could treat housing like the basic necessity it is instead of like a commodity for investors to profit from. But we don't, because the people who own multiple properties, the people who profit from skyrocketing rents, the real estate investors and landlords and corporate property management companies, they donate to politicians, they lobby Congress, they make sure that any attempt to control rent gets shot down before it even gets a vote. So rents keep rising and politicians throw up their hands and act like there's nothing they can do, when the truth is they're choosing not to do anything because their donors don't want them to. The same thing happens with the minimum wage. Politicians could raise it tomorrow. They could pass legislation making the minimum wage $15 an hour, $20 an hour, $25 an hour. They could tie it to inflation so it automatically increases every year to keep up with the cost of living. They could make it illegal for corporations to pay poverty wages while their CEOs make millions. But they don't, because Walmart and McDonald's and Amazon and every other corporation that relies on cheap labor tells them not to. These companies donate millions of dollars to political campaigns, and in exchange, politicians protect their ability to exploit workers. It's legalized bribery, and it's why nothing ever changes. And then these same politicians have the audacity to complain about people being on food stamps. They refuse to raise wages. They refuse to control rent. They refuse to address the affordability crisis. And then they turn around and shame people for for needing assistance. They call them lazy. They call them freeloaders. They talk about welfare queens and people gaming the system. They create work requirements and asset limits and humiliating bureaucratic hoops for people to jump through just to get help feeding their families. It's cruel. It's deliberately, intentionally cruel. And it's designed to keep people desperate and powerless. You want to know what real cruelty looks like? Look at what happens during a government shutdown. Federal workers, people with real jobs and responsibilities, miss their paychecks. They can't pay their bills. They show up at food banks because they can't afford groceries. And while they're standing in line hoping to get some canned goods and bread, the politicians who caused the shutdown are still getting paid. Congress still gets their salaries during a shutdown. They still get their health care. They're still living comfortably while the people they're supposed to serve are choosing between gas money and food. That's not governance. That's hostage taking. That's using working people as pawns in political games and not caring at all about the real-world consequences for real families. This country doesn't care about solving poverty. It doesn't care about making sure people can afford to live. It cares about protecting corporate profits and keeping working people too broke and too desperate to demand better. That's the system. That's how it's designed. And until people understand that, nothing is going to change. But here's what I know. Black Americans have always figured out a way to survive in trying times. We've had to. We've never had the luxury of relying on the government to take care of us. We've never been able to trust that the system will work in our favor. We've always known that we're on our own, and we've built our own systems of survival. One of those systems is the barter economy. Our grandparents knew this. Our great-grandparents knew this. When you don't have money, you trade goods and services. You help your neighbor fix their car. They help you fix your roof. You babysit for your cousin. They cook you meals. You cut someone's hair. They do your taxes. You don't need money when you have community, when you have skills, when you have people you can rely on. The barter system worked for Black communities for generations because we understood something that America tries to make you forget. Money is just a tool. It's not the only way to get what you need. It's not the only form of value. Your time has value. Your skills have value. Your labor has value. And you can trade those things directly without ever involving a dollar. We're going to have to get back to that. We're going to have to remember how to survive without depending on a system that's designed to fail us. We're going to have to rebuild those community networks where we take care of each other, where we trade and barter and share resources, where we don't wait for politicians to save us because they're not coming. Black barbershops used to be community hubs where you could get a haircut and find out who needed help with what. Black churches used to organize food sharing and skill exchanges. Black neighborhoods used to have informal economies where people traded goods and services without ever involving the formal banking system. We did this because we had to, but also because we understood that community wealth isn't just about money in the bank. It's about having people you can rely on, skills you can trade, and a network of mutual support. We need to bring that back. We need to start building parallel economies in our communities where we're not dependent on corporations that won't pay us fairly or politicians who won't protect us. We need to start trading with each other, hiring each other, supporting each other's businesses, and creating systems of exchange that don't require us to participate in a broken economy. If you're good at fixing things, trade that skill. If you can cook, trade that. If you can teach, trade that. If you have a garden, trade your vegetables. If you can sew, trade that. If you have tools or equipment people need, share them. If you have space, share it. Build relationships where you help each other without money being the middleman. This isn't just about survival. This is about building power. When you don't need their money, they can't control you. When you have a community that takes care of each other, you don't have to accept poverty wages. When you can trade your skills for what you need, you're not desperate. You're not powerless. You're not one paycheck away from disaster. The system wants you isolated, dependent, desperate, and grateful for whatever crumbs they throw you. The barter economy says we don't need your crumbs. We'll take care of ourselves. This is what 40 million Americans on food stamps should tell us. The system is broken and it's not going to fix itself. Politicians are not going to save you. Corporations are not going to pay you fairly. The government is not going to solve the affordability crisis or control rent or raise the minimum wage. They're going to keep doing exactly what they've been doing, which is nothing, while more and more people slip into poverty. So what are you going to do about it? Are you going to keep waiting for politicians to care? Are you going to keep hoping that corporations will develop a conscience? Are you going to keep playing by rules that are designed to keep you poor? Or are you going to start building something different? Are you going to start connecting with your neighbors and figuring out what you can trade? Are you going to start supporting local businesses and keeping money in your community? Are you going to start creating systems of mutual aid where you take care of each other? Black America has always known that we can't depend on this country to take care of us. We've always had to take care of ourselves. And we've survived. We've thrived. We've built businesses and communities and networks of support even when the government and corporations were actively working against us. Now, the rest of America is learning what we've always known. You're on your own. The system doesn't care about you. The politicians don't care about you. The corporations definitely don't care about you. You're just a source of labor and profit, and if you can't afford to eat, that's your problem. But it doesn't have to be. You can build something different. You can create community economies where people take care of each other. You can trade skills and goods and services. You can stop depending on a system that's designed to fail you and start building one that actually works. 40 million Americans on food stamps is a crisis, but it's also an opportunity to realize that the system is broken, an opportunity to stop waiting for politicians to fix it, an opportunity to start building alternatives. The richest country on earth shouldn't have 40 million people who can't afford to eat. But since it does, and since the people in power have no interest in changing that, maybe it's time we stopped calling it the richest country on earth. Maybe it's time we stopped believing the lies about American prosperity and started dealing with American reality. And maybe it's time we remembered that we don't need their system to survive. We never did. Black America has been proving that for 400 years. We've always found a way. We've always survived. We've always taken care of our own when nobody else would. So to the 40 million Americans on food stamps, to everyone struggling to afford rent and groceries, to everyone working full-time and still poor, here's what I want you to know. You're not alone. The system failed you, but your community doesn't have to. Start building networks of mutual support, start trading with your neighbors, start creating alternatives to an economy that doesn't value you, and to the politicians getting paid during shutdowns while federal workers stand in food bank lines. We see you. We see exactly what you value and who you serve, and we're done waiting for you to care. We'll take care of ourselves just like we always have. We don't need you. We never did.